Murder and Such contains true stories about murders, the macabre, true crime, serial killers, and other dark subject matter. This includes adult themes, explicit language, descriptions of gore, violence, and other information provided by news articles, witness testimony, and public record. Murder and Such is not intended for all audiences, and although warnings will be set in place, listener discretion is still advised.
Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Murder and Such. I am your host, Hunter. I'm sorry for the delay on this episode, but I'm glad that you're here with me. This may not be the longest episode I've ever put out, but there is a little bit of relevance with this one that might strike a note with a lot of listeners. But, as always, before I get into the episode itself, I wanted to thank my new executive producers of the show, Nikki with Strictly Homicide podcast, and a massive thank you to Gusto. I would also like to thank my friends Michaela Reeder and Iowa native Ashley Zumak for donating to the show as well. I'd also like to welcome back Michelle Pierce to the Patreon page. My executive producers are thanked at the end of each and every episode for their donation of $5 or more. But if you'd like to join the Patreon, help fund the back end of the show, and get some exclusive shows as well as get the show early and ad-free, you can find that link at patreon.com/murderandsuch, and you can donate just $1 per episode. So thank you, Michelle, thank you, Gusto, Ashley, thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Michaela, for donating to the show. Now let's get into this. I'm sure that you've seen the hashtags going around on social media such as Save the Children or Save Our Children. Back in the 1970s, it started off as a political coalition to overturn a recently legislated county ordinance in Miami, Florida, that banned discrimination in areas of housing, employment, and public accommodation based on the pretense of somebody's sexual orientation. Essentially, they looped that if you were gay, bisexual, or anything other than a straight person, you were a child predator. This was obviously a complete farce, and the vast majority of people who stood against the anti-discrimination policy used the Bible as their defense. So, fuck those people. Now, there was a movement in 2011 that was called Operation Protect Our Children, or otherwise known as Operation Save Our Children. It was a joint operation that included the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the U.S. Department of Justice's Child Exploitation and Obscenity section, and its sole purpose was actually a really good one. They went to seize warrants against 10 domain names of websites that advertised and distributed child pornography. Taking it down was part of ICE's Cybercrime Center, or the C3. One website that was taken down was the website moo, that's with 3 O's, .com. When it was finally seized, the website had a splash screen that read, quote, "This domain name has been seized by ICE Homeland Security investigations pursuant to a seize issued by the United States District Court under the authority of Title 18 U.S. Code 2254. Advertisement, distribution, transportation, receipt, and possession of child pornography constitute federal crimes that carry penalties for the first-time offenders of up to 30 years in federal prison, a $250,000 fine, forfeiture, and restitution." End quote. So this one is a very stark contrast to the first movement that began back in 1977. Saying that the gays are going to corrupt your children, Maybe it was a sign of the time back in the 70s, but obviously that's not really a thing. But taking down child porn websites? Abso-fucking-lutely. I support that 110,000%. But lately, there's been a new movement online that's been incredibly troubling, to say the very least. But there are some good things that have happened as well. Now, as of recording this, we are still in a global pandemic. And that's another thing. If you're listening to this like years into the future and you're wondering why I'm talking about something that happened years ago, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pull relevance into the forefront with my episodes. But with the massive influx of us spending time at home on computers and phones and all of our stuff, people get bored. It's very, very common. It happens, and even I was losing my shit when my work had me working from home for a month. So, like most of us, we try to find something that occupies our time, right? Well, how about diving into a load of conspiracy theories? Hell, there's some really good podcasts out there that dive into some of them, like Conspiracy Theory Thursday, and my favorite, succulent, sexy, and wet-ass puss podcasters, Nick and Rob with the Brohio podcast. Nick says I'm always getting too serious with murder and such, and I keep telling him that the only thing I want to get serious with is him, so hit me up, girl. You know I'm waiting for you. But they're both incredible shows, and you should definitely be listening to the both of them because they go deep into some incredibly interesting topics. And one of the things that people really like is something that will make the hairs on their neck stand up and maybe make them question morality not only with our government, but sometimes with themselves. Now that brings me to my next point. Back in 2017, a little-known website by the name of 4chan started posting things by a person who went by the single-letter name of Q. If you don't remember me talking about 4chan before with my episodes about Alec Manassian, the Toronto van attack, or Brandon Clark, who murdered Bianca Devins, they were very avid users of this website, which is pretty much a cesspool of all of the things that happen on the internet. Pizzagate even got its starting there, and if you're not of sound state of mind, it can certainly make some of its users become radical. So with Q posting on 4chan, they started claiming that Q had Q clearance, which is a clearance code used by the Department of Energy with President Donald Trump's administration, and they were using 4chan to hide their identity and be anonymous. But as it tends to do with most things, Q started posting elsewhere, using different platforms, and it ultimately became the group known as QAnon. Now today, it's known as a far-right conspiracy theory group, and on August 1st of 2019, an FBI intelligence bulletin from the Bureau's Phoenix field office details conspiracy theory-driven domestic extremists. In the document, it specifically mentions QAnon and also brings up Pizzagate. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Pizzagate, it was a far-right-leaning belief that the Clinton family and associates were hiding a pedophile ring inside of the basement of a Washington, D.C. pizza place that didn't have a basement. It also didn't help that human turd bucket Alex Jones was in on the conspiracy and started sending his mouth-breathing minions to help perpetuate the false narrative. This had spread to the point where on December 4th of 2016, a 28-year-old man by the name of Edgar Madison Welch from Salisbury, North Carolina, had decided to head to the Comet Ping Pong restaurant in Washington, D.C. with an AR-15 rifle and proceeded to unload 3 rounds into the ceiling, a desk, and a door. Luckily, nobody was injured in the incident, and Edgar was arrested without incident. But this was somewhat before the entire QAnon thing, and to some extent, QAnon has spread worldwide. To the point where President Trump, on the cusp of his re-election campaign, has not denounced the group. But the main one that QAnon is pushing is that, quote, a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles running a global child sex trafficking ring is plotting against President Donald J. Trump, who is battling them, leading to a day of reckoning involving the mass arrest of journalists and politicians. End quote. Since then, they've also perpetuated the theories that the government created the COVID-19 virus in a worldwide fashion to destroy President Donald J. Trump, and that Bill Gates is developing a vaccine so he can microchip us, and that all of the pictures of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were photoshopped, and that the New York lawsuit both against Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein that stated they had raped a 13-year-old girl back in 1994 was paid for by George Soros. Either way, these guys are kind of fucking nutty. I'll have you know that within the last week, a man by the name of Jason Galinas of New Jersey has been ousted as the developer and mouthpiece for the website qmap.pub, which is amongst one of the largest websites that promotes QAnon conspiracy theories, and had over 10 million visitors back in July of 2020. After he was found out, he refused to comment on the allegation, but mysteriously, the website had gone down, which was the primary archive of a lot of these QAnon conspiracy theories. So chances are, if you're on Facebook, you've more than likely seen the hashtags about Save Our Children or Save the Children. It's taken a lot of different forms over the years, and while the 2011 operation was a complete success, there is an avid problem at hand, and that is child trafficking. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, otherwise known as the NCMEC, they have assisted law enforcement and families with more than 29,000 cases of missing children in 2019 alone. Of them, 91% were endangered runaways, 4% were abductions by a family member, 4% were critically missing young adults ages 18 to 20, less than 1% were non-family abductions, and 1% were lost, injured, or otherwise missing. They also participate with Amber Alerts, which are a much more massive thing now, considering that we all get the alerts on our phones when a new Amber Alert is issued, which has led to at least 1,000 kids being successfully recovered as a result of the Amber Alert program, and 75 of those were credited to the Wireless Emergency Alert program itself. Even more beyond that, there has been some more developments when it comes to missing children. It was reported on August 30th of 2020 that the U.S. Marshal had found 39 missing children in Georgia Operation Not Forgotten that took place over a 2-week period. After the weeks-long investigation, they cleared 26 arrest warrants and found 9 people at the scene that were arrested and charged with human trafficking, sex trafficking, parental kidnapping, registered sex offender violations, drugs, drug possession, firearm possession, and custodial interference charges. Over the last year, the U.S. Marshal's Office has led to the recovery of 295 missing children in the United States alone, and has contributed to the recovery of missing children in 75% of other cases, 60% of those being recovered within just a week's time. Quote, "The message to missing children and their families is that we will never stop looking for you, end quote. Which that was said by the director of the Marshal Service, Donald Washington. But it kind of goes without saying that not all cases have a happy ending. Some kids are not found alive, or sometimes never found at all. In the first episode of Murder and Such, Casey Fredrickson stated that Evelyn Miller had just ran away, but her body was found just days later. But years later after that, Casey was charged with her rape and murder and found guilty. And it happens all too often, especially with younger, impoverished, and at-risk kids. Does QAnon have a point when talking about saving our children? Yes, they do. But I do say that with a grain of salt, due to the fact that they think satanic pedophiles are doing it, and somehow longtime friend of Jeffrey Epstein, a man by the name of Donald Trump, is going to save all the kids from this occult sex trafficking ring. Then bring all of these satanic, pedophile, yada 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 people to justice. It's not likely, and I'll even go so far as to say there's a snowball's chance in hell that it's going to happen. I'll even quote a meme that I've posted almost every time it's come across my timeline, and that is, QAnon is just trailer park Scientology. Prove me wrong. But the core message, to save the children, is in and of itself a good one. Too many kids become missing every year. Too many kids are in danger of being abducted. And too many kids have lost their homes, families, and even their lives for the sole purpose of being seen as a material object, rather than a human being. But enough about trailer park Scientologists or QAnon. I'm going to get into this episode. But as always, my name is Hunter, and you're listening to Murder and Such. And this is episode 70, JaRay Wilson.
Authorities say a teenage girl reported missing from Weatherford may have been sold into human trafficking. This is JaRay Wilson. The OHP says that they have a reason to believe she may be in Oklahoma City.
Just like goods and services are shipped up and down our interstates, so are people as a part of human trafficking rings. Tonight, a Weatherford father has not heard from his 16-year-old daughter since he received a text from her on the 15th. And now he's concerned that she may have been caught up in a human trafficking ring.
She had told some friends that she was being sought after by this guy named G, and that she owed him $700 and he was going to kill her or prostitute her out.
Human trafficking is a serious problem in Oklahoma.
You know, these girls are out there, they're being threatened with their lives. They're being told, if you don't bring this much money in, we will beat you, and so they're terrified.
What keeps you going?
Her. She's strong and she's hard-headed like her daddy. And we know we got to stay strong for her.
For this episode, we're heading to the state of Oklahoma, the year of 2012. And before I go any further with this case, I would love to extend a thank you to Holly Eli for emailing me and suggesting that I cover this episode. I hope that I do a decent job of it. So thank you, Holly, again. In 2012, JaRay was just starting her life at the age of 16. Now let's go back to high school. Can you say that any of us were complete and utter angels? Most likely not. For my personal experiences, when I was 16, I smoked cigarettes, even though the legal age was 18. And yeah, I drank, even though the legal age of alcohol consumption is 21. I had my driver's license, I got into a few fights, but of course, it's a phase where we can all learn and grow out of, but the vast majority of us somewhat think that we are invincible. Hell, even I did. Now, if you look at the image that I posted for this episode, you can see that JaRay is a beautiful young woman. Holly had mentioned that she was a scene kid, and as a former scene kid myself from the 2006 era, I can confirm that she definitely looked the part. JaRay Mickle Wilson's parents were Rodney and Jara. Even though JaRay may have been a little young and rebellious, they had nothing but love and compassion for their young daughter. That's kind of your duty as a parent. You know that your kid is going to make mistakes. It's common. It happens. You can try your damnedest to put your kid on the path of straight and narrow, but sometimes kids divert from whatever path you try and set them on. No child, and let's just put this in stone right now, at 16-year-old, JaRay Wilson is a child. But no child is perfect. Kids make mistakes, and learning from them is all a part of growing up. There's a lot of factors at play when you're in high school, social statuses being one of them, plus social pressure. You want to be popular, go and hang out with the cool kids, or whichever clique that you find yourself in. There's friends, there's going to be concerts, some partying. Plus, 16 is an age where a lot of kids, myself included, also lose their virginity. So you've got that playing with your hormones at the same time as well. We've all been there. That's just the way that nature works. And nature can be a real bitch at times. But JaRay had friends. She had common interests with a lot of people around her. Some people were older and some were the same age, but of those people, there's always a few bad apples. But even fewer can be absolutely rotten to the core.
Hello my lovelies, my name is Chantel and I'm the host over at Lady Justice True Crime. Lady Justice is a weekly podcast that covers fascinating cases both past and present from around the UK and Ireland. Some of them are strange, many are unbelievable, all of them are completely unique and are someone's story. So please come join me on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
October 14th, 2012. JaRay Wilson is last seen at a convenience store in Hydro, Oklahoma. From there, she was picked up by two friends by the name of Cody Godfrey and Tucker McGee. JaRay had told friends prior that she owed money to a man by the name of Gilberto Paz, who was a known dealer in the area, and sometimes JaRay would purchase some substances from him. However, JaRay is 16, and I don't know how good you were with money, but she had fallen behind on some payments to Gilberto. Suffice it to say, Gilberto is definitely a man that you do not want to mess with. He has a very lengthy court record, including possession of a firearm by a felon, false personation, conspiracy, assault and or battery with a deadly weapon, and robbery with a deadly weapon. Now, if you owe money to someone like that, suffice it to say, you're going to be in some deep shit. And this is something that JaRay had told her friends before the night of October 14th, and one that would lead them to a massive manhunt. After Tucker and Cody had picked up JaRay, they headed out to a remote area of Weatherford, Oklahoma. While there, the three of them dabbled in a substance known as K2. If you've never heard of K2, K2 also goes by the name of spice, which is a synthetic cannabinoid that can be sprayed onto dried plant material so it's easily smoked like marijuana or tobacco, but it also comes in a liquid form in which people use to vaporize or inhale. Back in the early to mid 2010s, it was more widely accessible and was almost legal considering at the time the DEA was trying to crack down on synthetic marijuanas, but a lot of companies who produced K2 would change the chemical components ever so slightly to avoid whichever ones were deemed illegal at this time. K2 is incredibly dangerous, because while marijuana was still unilaterally made illegal at the time, it's still much safer than synthetic marijuana. Even to this day, weed is much safer than K2. According to drugabuse.gov, the psychotic effects of synthetic cannabinoids include extreme anxiety, confusion, paranoia, and hallucinations. Other traits of those who have smoked K2 have gone to the emergency room have shown signs of rapid heart rate, vomiting, violent behavior, and suicidal thoughts. But like I said before, when you're as young as these kids are, you might think that you're still invincible. Now, while they were out in the middle of nowhere smoking, JaRay had confessed to both Tucker and Cody that she owed money to Gilberto, and she feared that she would be sold into sex trafficking rings to pay off her debt. It was said that JaRay was trying to air out her problems to some friends, because that's what friends are for, of course. But after that night, JaRay vanished into thin air. JaRay never came home after that night in October of 2012. Tucker and Cody had stated that they didn't know where she had gone off to because they had dropped her off at an apartment complex in Weatherford. No sight nor sound. The only things that they had to go off of were the statements from Cody and Tucker, what she had told her friends with her debt to Gilberto Paz, and her cell phone records. With the hand that she currently had considering her debt, and maybe because she was feeling some sort of paranoia from the K2, she had sent a text message to her friend stating, quote, "I feel sketched out, but I can't go home," end quote. The previous month, Gilberto had done something brutal, but he had yet to face charges for it. Gilberto and two associates by the name of Stacy Buckmaster and Curtis Sutherland had went inside of an Oklahoma City trailer in an attempt to rob a man of narcotics and money. Stacy had stayed outside of the trailer in a car as lookout while she had heard gunshots ring out. Gilberto and Curtis were met by a man by the name of Jonathan Patton, who was carrying a shotgun while trying to ransack the house of said drugs and money. In exchange, Gilberto and Curtis fired upon the man, sending him to the hospital, in which he later died of his injuries. They took the drugs and money, and they had left the scene. They were not apprehended anytime soon, and at the time of JaRay's disappearance, Gilberto was still a free man. Now, in the meantime, JaRay's parents had no earthly idea where she had gone off to, so they filed a missing persons report on October 16th of 2012. On November 1st of 2012, a page titled "Bring JaRay Wilson Home" was created on Facebook to help spread awareness about her disappearance, with updates posted almost every day to keep putting the word out and help these parents find their missing daughter. Of course, Gilberto was a person of interest. Going off of the information that they had at the time of JaRay's disappearance, the authorities knew exactly who Gilberto Paz was. And on November 20th of 2012, an article posted by KOCO Channel 5 News had published that Gilberto Paz had been arrested for failing to appear in court for an unrelated matter, that matter being a weapons charge. Now, while they had him in custody, he was questioned about what had happened to JaRay Wilson. Now, finally, a break in the case after JaRay had been missing for over a month at this point. A tip line had been established in the meantime, as well as a collaboration with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Her status was listed as an endangered runaway. A picture that they had posted, which was a missing poster, had stated her age, birth date, and all relevant information, as well as stating that, quote, JaRay has a tattoo of a black owl on the right side of her abdomen and lace up on her lower abdomen. Her lips are pierced, and she has multiple piercings in both ears, as well as gauges. When JaRay was last seen, her hair was dyed black with blonde streaks, end quote. The post that had that information was shared 519 times since it was posted. JaRay's family had set up a P.O. box to take in donations to help find who might have taken JaRay, as well as a local printing company had donated shirts with JaRay's information on it, and the family had actually handed them out free to anybody who wanted to wear them. People commented on the post that they had posted her missing posters in Lubbock, Texas, Amarillo, Texas, and even New Mexico, putting them up at gas stations, poster boards, and passing them out to anybody who might be interested in keeping their eye out for this young woman. Thoughts, prayers, hugs, and well wishes were shared on the page on an almost constant basis. But one question kept leaving people dumbfounded. Why wasn't there an Amber Alert issued for JaRay Wilson? In a Change.org petition that was made by JaRay's cousin Jamie, it stated that, quote, she does not qualify for an Amber Alert because for an Amber Alert to be effective in recovering a missing child, the law enforcement agency must have enough information to believe that an immediate broadcast to the public will enhance the efforts of law enforcement to locate the child and apprehend the suspect. The element requires as much descriptive information as possible about the abducted child and the abduction, as well as the descriptive information about the suspect and the suspect's vehicle, end quote. The name of the Change.org petition was, quote, Start the JaRay Alert, and it was deemed a confirmed victory after 1,987 signatures were gained from the page. It was then sent off to the Oklahoma State Legislature, but with Gilberto's arrest, they are hoping to have some answers as to what happened with JaRay. Gilberto was given a very lengthy interrogation session with investigators, but he cooperated with them nonetheless. Although he was brought in on his weapons charge, all of that was unrelated to JaRay as a whole, and they just wanted some answers. The same day that he was arrested, a YouTube video under the username JaRay Wilson had published a 4-minute and 53-second long video showing pictures of JaRay and a begging plea to help bring her home, and that she was believed to have been sold into the human trafficking trade. Hopefully, with Gilberto's cooperation, they'll finally have some answers. The next day, on November 21st of 2012, another person of interest was arrested. Could this have been what they were looking for? Unfortunately, it wasn't. The other person of interest was Curtis Sutherland, and both were arrested in connection to the murder of Jonathan Patton. Sutherland was also questioned about the disappearance of JaRay, but at the end of this entire debacle, both Gilberto Paz and Curtis Sutherland were cleared as suspects in JaRay's disappearance. I will note that Gilberto Paz is currently imprisoned in Oklahoma, as he and Curtis were charged with the murder case, and both were sentenced. Gilberto is serving a life sentence considering the charges that I had mentioned previously, which also included first-degree murder. Now, I can't speak for the family of JaRay nor her friends, but this one break that potentially had in the case had unfortunately led to a dead end. And this also goes without saying, but at the time, it's the beginning of the holiday season. One that they had spent with JaRay for the last 16 years, but this one would be the first one without her. But although it wasn't the same, the family never stopped fighting. The Facebook page for JaRay had actively been posting on a regular basis. Benefits were also set in place on her behalf of the family. On December 9th of 2012, a free chili and hot dog dinner was served, with the bluegrass band Triple L Band playing a benefit show for her, and the family asking for donations to help find what had ever happened to JaRay. Not even 2 weeks later, on December 19th, an auction was held where people had donated TVs, car tires, a full-on car, and all proceeds would go out to help find leads, information, or anything at all that would help lead to where JaRay was, what had happened, or even a person who could be suspected with her disappearance. The family never gave up. Days came and gone, billboards were established with her info, but nothing was coming to fruition. By this time, JaRay's disappearance was national news, and the images for the convenience store where JaRay had last been seen alive were shared thousands of times, and leads kept pouring in, but the vast majority of them had led to dead ends, unfortunately. Christmas also came and went, as did the new year into 2013. And on January 7th of 2013, a post made on the Facebook page of JaRay had stated, quote, "We want to thank all our Facebook friends and family for your time in sharing JaRay's information. We also appreciate all the prayers, and we will never stop believing. JaRay is coming home soon, safe. God hears our prayers. Bring JaRay home." End quote. A picture of JaRay was posted with her pink hair, black eyeliner, and her captivating smile with the words, "We will find you." In the meantime, more and more information came in, but led to nothing. The same pictures were popping up around the internet thanks to the page and the thousands of people who were sharing her information, her picture, and the hopes of finding this girl. In a post published on April 23rd of 2013, a status said, quote, "We have no new updates lately. Our baby is still out there. So please keep sharing her photos and info and praying she comes home soon." End quote. No matter what, the family kept to their word and they were never giving up. Somebody out there knew something. Somebody knew what had happened to JaRay Wilson. This is an at-risk youth who disappeared into the night, believed to be sold as property to be violated, abused, assaulted, and treated as property rather than a human being. But the police were doing their due diligence. They were following every single lead that they could, but no answers were coming forward, and nobody was being brought to justice for how, where, or why this girl had been abducted. The seasons changed, more prayer vigils were established, even more donations kept rolling in. Even a $10,000 reward was offered for information leading to the return of JaRay Wilson. This girl had her entire life ahead of her. Sure, she got into some trouble just like the rest of us. That's without a doubt. But kids make mistakes. Kids, arguably, can do some stupid shit. We've all been there. As I've stated in prior episodes, the human brain is not deemed fully developed until the age of 25. But that's no reason for somebody to be bought or sold, abused and beaten. It's a chance to learn from your mistakes and become the person you are destined to be. In JaRay's case, that chance seemed to be diminishing by the day. October 15th, 2013. An update was posted 1 year after JaRay disappeared without a trace. The post stated, quote, "Don't forget about the vigil and balloon release tonight. October 15th on the corner of State and Main in Weatherford at 7 p.m. With that post was a picture that said, "Missing and endangered. JaRay Wilson, age 16, missing from Weatherford, Oklahoma since 10/15 of 2012. If you have any info on JaRay, please contact the OBN Human Trafficking Division at 855-617-2288 or contact investigator James T. Bottoms," which then listed the various phone numbers and email addresses in which the public could reach out to. A person has stated that they thought they had seen JaRay, but the page directed them to send a message. And I can't say if it went anywhere, but chances are, most likely, that it didn't. The next day, a lengthy post was published and then shared on the page that went by the name of Liar Catchers, which is a private investigation team based out of Louisville, Kentucky. The post reads, in its entirety, quote, "A 16-year-old Weatherford girl disappeared without a trace. 1 year later, the search to find JaRay Wilson is still far from over. Investigators say that they get several tips a week, but unfortunately, they're not any closer to solving her missing persons case. Quote, I gotta keep looking for her and fighting every day to find her," end quote, JaRay's mom had said. Wilson explained she refuses to give up. She said that the last year has felt like one long day. Quote, "It doesn't seem like it's been a whole year since I have seen her," she said. Her daughter, JaRay Wilson, vanished on October 15th of 2012. The only signs of the teenager since then have been thousands of posters they put up around the state. Quote, "I'm frustrated and I'm emotionally drained, but I'm not giving up," Wilson explained. Same as the family, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics Human Trafficking Unit is working to find JaRay Wilson. Investigators initially believed the teenager was sold into the sex trade. Quote, "We still don't have concrete evidence to point us to human trafficking, kidnapping, or runaway," OBN spokesperson Mark Woodward had said. Quote, "We don't know, but somebody out there has the answer," end quote. Since the day of her disappearance, agents have followed more than 1,000 leads and conducted more than 76 interviews. Investigators have also served more than a dozen search warrants in 6 different states: Maryland, Texas, Nevada, New Mexico, Kansas, and Tennessee. Woodward explained the search warrants are for cell phone records, surveillance video, and photos captured at traffic lights or convenience stores. Investigators say it's possible her image has changed some since the day she went missing. The last known photos of JaRay Wilson were captured at a convenience store in Hydro, Oklahoma on October 12th of 2012. Still, investigators are optimistic. Quote, "Don't worry about the clock or calendar. We need to be focusing on the information and getting someone to speak up and come forward with information about where she is," Woodward said. JaRay Wilson hopes it's soon, so she doesn't have to spend another day without her daughter. Quote, "I wish she was already home, but I know she is out there somewhere," Wilson had said. Anyone with information is encouraged to call the OBN Human Trafficking Tip Line toll-free at 855-617-2288. you can remain anonymous. There is also $10,000 reward being offered in the case. And that was the post. And they received 38 likes, 11 comments, and 335 more shares from that post. JaRay wasn't giving up, neither were the rest of JaRay's family and friends. They were going to bring this beautiful girl home. And it looked like the holiday season was about to be another one that would be spent without the gleaming smile of this now 17-year-old girl. Thanksgiving came, and Thanksgiving went. The dinner table sat with an empty chair for over a year now. But JaRay and Rodney Wilson never gave up hope for finding their daughter. But then they got the news. A break had finally came on the case on December 16th of 2013. A secret that had been held for over a year, and somebody who knew something finally came forward with a grand jury report. And that person was none other than Cody Godfrey. Some would call it a guilty conscience. Some would hope to finally atone for what they might have done themselves, or knew of who could have done such a horrible thing. Cody had been questioned by the police before and was released without any issues. The investigation involved law enforcement of every single type that you could think of. But this kid knew something, and he finally came to the authorities. He stated that it was a revelation from God to finally come forward and tell the truth. He led police out to the spot that had haunted this kid for the last year and 2 months, and when they finally showed up, he pointed to the area in which JaRay Wilson's remains were finally uncovered, and the search for JaRay had finally ended. Cody had divulged all relevant information to the authorities after that, hopefully trying to get himself a plea deal. As it was stated by him, he was with Tucker McGee the day that they had picked up JaRay from the convenience store in Hydro. The same convenience store that the listener Holly, who recommended this episode, drives past every single day on her way to work. Tucker had stated to Cody that he was becoming more and more irritated with JaRay. Tucker had stolen a .22 from his father, and in the car with Cody, on their way to pick up JaRay, Tucker had showed the gun to Cody and told him,
"We could go kill JaRay."
Obviously, Cody shrugged it off, and he thought of it as a joke. His birth date was October 24th of 1994, just 10 days shy of his 18th birthday. They were kids, but Tucker still obliged JaRay, and he picked her up. Her request was she needed a ride from Hydro back to Weatherford. On the way, they stopped north of the Weatherford airport to a remote area so they could smoke K2 together. Now, according to court documents, Tucker McGee was smoking K2 after he was first smoking marijuana as early as 15 years old. But that wasn't all that he had tried. Tucker then dropped out of high school in 10th grade and was reported that his drug usage included trying amphetamines, prescription pills, heroin, meth, cocaine, and once had attempted suicide by dropping 10 hits of ecstasy, which put him in a hospital for a week after his attempt. He had also been known to have stolen not just a gun from his dad, but he would also steal money from either of his parents to help support his addiction. Tucker also had a very tumultuous childhood. In court documents, it was stated that he was an extremely angry child and would sometimes develop psychotic episodes. In 2nd grade, he was suspended for bringing firecrackers to school. In the 3rd grade, he was suspended for having brought a knife with him into the classroom. In 4th grade, he was suspended for being a troublemaker and also for his violent outbursts. Then one thing that I can't really put my finger on the incident itself, but in the 7th grade he was suspended for, quote, an incident involving racism, end quote. In the 4th grade, he was introduced into pornography, and later he was known to have started watching more and more violent pornography as he continued his early childhood. He developed a fascination with morbid subject matter, including watching videos of gore and death, subjecting himself to the darker side of human activity. But on the night of October 14th, after he and Cody had picked up JaRay, they spent nearly 2.5 hours at the spot. JaRay had explained to the both of them about her situation about owing money to Gilberto and had confided in her two friends about how scared she was that there was going to be something done to her, such as being trafficked into a sex ring. But something struck JaRay as troubling. She could tell that something was definitely up, and there was something wrong with her being there with the both of them. As seen with the surveillance photos that were released after her disappearance, JaRay always had her phone with her at her side. This situation was no different as she started texting a friend by the name of Trey. Now the following is the last text messages that ever came from JaRay's phone. JaRay stated, "Hey." Trey said, "What's up?" JaRay, "I need to go elsewhere. WBY, or what about you?" Trey said, "Where you at?" JaRay had stated, "Out in the middle of the country." Trey asked, "With who?" JaRay said, "Cody and Tucker." Trey said, "Oh hell yeah." And JaRay had stated, "No dude, I need to leave. Like, fuck." Trey said, "LOL, why?" And the last text message that JaRay had ever said was the one that stated, "I feel sketched out. I can't go home." At this point, Tucker had finally made the decision that would be a mystery for the next 14 months. He took out the stolen .22 caliber pistol, pointed it at JaRay Wilson's head, and pulled the trigger. JaRay's body fell forward with her cell phone in hand, and Cody stated that JaRay never saw it coming. Tucker was so irritated with JaRay, just trying to convey her fears, her worries, and just looking to get a ride home, but never thought in her life that the people she would confide in would be the ones that would take her life. Unfortunately, JaRay had not died instantly. So Tucker stood over her body, looked at Cody, and asked him, "Why isn't she dead?" Cody had been completely blindsided at that point, but Tucker took out the pistol and fired another round into JaRay's head, killing this 16-year-old girl. After the murder, the two proceeded to take JaRay and throw her lifeless body over a fence, and then proceeded to drag it underneath a tree. They then sat down and smoked more K2. Then they grabbed JaRay's backpack and purse and discarded it into a dumpster at a car wash in Weatherford. Of course, just leaving her body under a tree wouldn't be enough to hide the evidence from someone unsuspecting. So the next day they brought a third person into the fold. The third person was a man by the name of Caleb McLemore. And the three of them headed out to the site, and they took JaRay's body, dug a shallow grave, and buried her remains in there, as well as their secret, for the next 14 months. Tucker then went back to the site where he had shot JaRay and found her cell phone. He then proceeded to smash it as much as he could, and then threw the pieces of her phone off of a bridge and into a creek. Caleb had recommended to Tucker that he get rid of the pistol he used to kill JaRay, in which he did. His father later came forward and said that a pistol was missing. The reason that they had never come forward with any of this information was due to the fact that their alibi would include Tucker and Cody saying that they dropped off JaRay at the apartment complex, and that if she did come up missing, they would take her fear of being sold into prostitution to pay off her debt as the primary reason of why she most likely wouldn't be found. Tucker then threatened to both Cody and Caleb and told them that if they ever spoken a word about the murder, that he would find them and kill them both as well. This kid was unhinged. "14 months. 14 months. Can you remember what happened 14 months ago? From the day of me doing this episode, 14 months ago would be July 27th of 2019. The UK was facing intense heat waves, which is notable because not all of the housing in the UK has air conditioners. Even one of the top news stories of that day was that President Trump was blaming former President Barack Obama for the air conditioning in the White House. The United States House of Representatives was seeking Robert Mueller's grand jury information as President Trump had not been impeached at the time. The movies Midsummer, the live-action The Lion King movie, and Spider-Man Far From Home were still showing in theaters. Hell, movie theaters were still open and flourishing at that time. It doesn't seem like it was 14 months ago now, does it? It almost feels like it was an eternity ago. Just remember that the friends and family of JaRay Wilson weren't thinking about how long ago Spider-Man came out. They were thinking of where their friend, their family, and their daughter had been this entire time. But now, her remains were found. The question of where she could have been all this time was answered in the worst way possible. Tucker McGee was arrested by the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and charged with first-degree murder. Since Cody had come forward with the authorities, he was being charged as an accessory to the murder. Caleb McLemore was also being charged with the cover-up as one count of accessory after the fact. And rightfully so, I might add. But these other two could have been protected. They were kids, yes, I get that. Guilt is a very real thing. Yes, I get that as well. But 14 months is a very long time to be holding such a dark secret. In the meantime, Cody had posted bail, but let's just say that he couldn't keep his nose clean. On a post from KFOR Oklahoma 4's website posted on September 29th of 2014, they stated that Cody had been pulled over by a cop on a routine stop. When he pulled Cody over, he had another person in the vehicle with him. Now the officer had smelled marijuana inside of the car, and that officer told him that he could smell the dankness emanating even from the window itself. So after Cody handed over an ounce of weed, Cody admitted that he had been arrested before, but wouldn't say what it was at first. When the officer asked what he was arrested for, he stated that he was going to be charged with an accessory to murder. Now, this was a violation of his bond conditions, which included random drug tests, considering he admitted to smoking K2, and that was a condition of his bail. Now, this would more than likely put him back behind bars until his trial. And honestly, good. I'm sorry, but fuck this kid. If he's out on bail, the one condition you have to do is just to keep your ass out of trouble, and he couldn't even do that. On August 11th of 2014, Tucker was arraigned in a court for his preliminary hearing. His trial was set for January 30th of 2015. Considering it was just 10 days before his 18th birthday, the court was charging him as an adult. The trial took quite some time, but on March 3rd of 2015, Tucker McGee was found guilty of first-degree murder with malice of forethought. He was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, Caleb McLemore was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years for his involvement with the burial and disposal of JaRay Wilson. Now, Cody Godfrey was actually given a suspended 7-year sentence. Prosecuting attorney Angela Marcy had stated, quote, "His testimony was very important to the case. Without his testimony, I don't know if we would ever have found JaRay Wilson," end quote. But that's not where the story ends. Sure, he's been sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. But after Tucker was sentenced to life without parole, he appealed the decision, and in a filing on December 6th of 2016, it stated that Tucker, the fucker, should be sentenced on the guidelines of first-degree manslaughter and first-degree heat of passion manslaughter, considering he was high on K2 at the time. And unfortunately, for the family and friends of JaRay Wilson, Tucker's life sentence was vacated also due to the fact that he was 17 at the time. JaRay's mother, Jara, had stated, quote, "To me, he doesn't deserve to be out. He took her life away from us, and he deserves to pay for it," end quote. And with that, they were gonna make him pay for it. They started petitioning for a law, and that law was called House Bill SB 1221, one that made an exception in cases like JaRay's, where the person would be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, should have that sentence upheld and not vacated for any reason. In statements to the news about the bill they were trying to get passed, JaRay's father Rodney had stated, quote,
"They're saying a minor doesn't deserve to stay in prison in a cage. My daughter's in a box, and she doesn't get to tell her side,"
end quote. He also added on behalf of the bill, quote,
"We'll never quit. It's what you do for your kids,"
end quote. And these parents are godsends. Even after JaRay's killer had been sentenced, they still fought for laws to protect other children and laid down the maximum on the monsters who took those kids away from them. Both of them have stones the size of the planet, and personally, I commend them on their fight to get justice. Now, the bill itself had actually passed the Senate, but unfortunately, 2018's Republican Governor Mary Fallin vetoed the bill when it came across her desk, essentially killing it. And I'll have you know that she's not only a piece of shit for vetoing such an important law that passed the House, but she was also replaced later in the year by Republican Kevin Stitt. Now, I hope that the bill can be later introduced down the road, because these parents' cry for help, justice, and answers should never fall from the stroke of a pen. Now, since shithead Mary Fallin voted the bill, on June 18th of 2018, Tucker McGee was resentenced for his murder charge. He was still given life in prison, but he will be eligible for parole after 38 years behind bars. This little fucker will be 61 years old when he will be eligible for parole. Let's hope that that never happens. Now, he's not the focal point of this story. JaRay Wilson is. JaRay's memory lives on through the rest of her friends and her family. Even a listener of this show remembers her, and I hope that you all will remember her. JaRay made some mistakes, but all kids do that. I did. You probably did too. But we all learn and grow from our mistakes and our shitheadedness. JaRay Wilson never got that chance. Her life was tragically cut short by a maniacal man for no reason at all that she was just trying to get a ride home from. I thank Holly for her recommendation of this story, and honestly, I hope I did it well. Is there a problem with human trafficking in this country? Absolutely yes. Is QAnon the fighting power behind finding missing and endangered children? No. They're trailer park Scientology and Diet Alex Jones and InfoWars. But that leads me to my reminder for you. There are kids out there who need to be found. Ones that still have time to be recovered. And hopefully in the future, I will never have to cover a case like this ever again. And I'm actually praying that I never will. JaRay Wilson may be gone, but she should never be forgotten. And I think that, considering how she was as a teenager and how we all are as teenagers, a little piece of JaRay Wilson will always live on inside of every single one of us. But I'm going to remind you to call someone that you love today. Check in on the ones that you love. Ask them how they're doing, how they've been holding up, and let them know that you're there for them. We all need that now more than ever. If someone's going through a rough patch with their family, their friends, or even if they may be struggling with substance abuse or even just mental health issues, giving them your time, compassion, and even just a hug can be something that will help them find what they're looking for. So I recommend that you do that today. And also, I would like to congratulate longtime friend and listener of the show, Jessica Aaron, for taking the first steps to better herself and her mental health. I'm proud of you, Jessica. But that's going to do it for this episode. And if you'd like to chat about this episode, feel free to follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Murder and Such. Or if you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, the PlayStation Network, Steam, and Snapchat at Huntor27. And I would love to thank all of my executive producers for this episode, such as Casey Jones, Gusto, Nikki with Strictly Homicide Podcast, Angel Renee, the Bama Brew Review Podcast, Natalie Stern, Laura McDonald, Jenna Kagawa, Michelle Pierce, Jax Doiron, Martha Pierce, Alex Aguirre, Justin Reebsum, McKenna Johnson, Ariel Safir, Stacy Jenks, Dan Sheridan, Benjamin Welch, Rambo Stanley, Erica Summers, Sharkley Daniels, Kyle Wesley, Danielle Longmore, Sarah Thompson, Mr. Sexy Dakota Curtis, Heather with Nature vs. Narcissism and Status Pending Podcasts, and of course, last but not least, Ashley Black and Tech Support. And if you'd like to help fund the back end of the show, get some exclusive stickers, get some really cool shit, you can find that at patreon.com/murderandsuch, and you can donate just $1 an episode, or if you would like to become an executive producer, you can donate $5 per episode. But as always, I will remind you to wash your filthy fucking hands. Wear your mask, call someone that you love today, because I love all of you, and I thank you for being a friend. I will also remind you to check your voter registration, because that's coming up real quick like. But until next time, My name is Hunter, and you've been listening to Murder and Such, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.